TLC 2, the Dudley Boyz, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian for the WWF tag titles. A build off of, well, we can really trace this back to the ladder match with Edge and Christian and the Hardys in 99. Then you added the Dudleys to the mix. And then they had the ladder match at the prior year's WrestleMania. And then the first TLC at the previous year's SummerSlam. So this is going into the second TLC match, but kind of the third installment of this weapons series.
And let's remember, like, this was at a time where the tag team division was just like, it was like the New Age Outlaws. It was just like really nothing
special. The tag
special.
division was on. It was terrible before this injection.
And certainly, like, not anything that made its name off of match quality. I mean, it made its name off of, like, a very good gimmick in the New Age Outlaws and just like that sort of style. But you weren't caring about the matches nor talking about the matches that much to the extent that you ended up doing with this very special combination of these six. And each one just kind of got progressively more and more maybe risky, but more and more talked about, to the point where expectations were huge heading into this TLC match. They were already big, I think, for the SummerSlam one, but now they had to even top that one on the biggest stage that they've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, you reached a certain point where I don't know how much further you could go. And this is the first like solid memory I have of that online discussion about how far you push things before this becomes, something that you just cannot top. And what are the future people going to be influenced by? Like, this is a hugely influential series of matches for another generation that are still trying to gain attention. And this is something Edge has spoken about, the fact that I can't lecture younger talent about doing crazy stuff to get over when I did this stuff. But I mean, he also acknowledges, like, when I started to really make money in this industry, it was like he got noticed by this, but it was developing as a more well-rounded performer years later. That was when he truly reached his, like, what he felt was his most complete as a performer and somebody making big money in this industry.
But it's getting noticed that was probably...
Oh, you take this out. It's a big difference. Like this, you can certainly look at all the physical toll that these TLC matches took. And I think many of them would state that, yeah, that was a price to pay, but a price worth it. Like, this is a very different trajectory for these performers if you take out these matches.
I guess the argument is, okay, like, once you're noticed, maybe you could take the, foot off the gas a bit. And so I would tell Darby Allin that, yeah, like, we notice you already, Darby Allin. We've noticed you for several years. You probably don't have to have.
We got it. We know who you are.
Yeah.
Again, that is a part of it. Like, at a certain point, like, you're not adding, you're just reaffirming where an audience already views you at. So let's go through the match, and then we're going to do some story time, okay? Which I think you're going to get a kick out of. So we get the ladders and chairs used immediately. And first of all, just a thing on the entrances, like, these six, they are walking into this like they're going into a UFC fight, okay? That's the demeanor on their faces. Like, they know what the expectation level is, and I think it's just a different mindset when you know what is ahead of you to pull off. And they have some very ambitious stunts here. And these were six guys that this is not just a kind of big milestone in their careers. It's the biggest audiences they've ever been in front of. And it's a very dangerous match that has no margin for error.
Hugely dangerous and hugely unpredictable. Number one, you have six people there, and they're all very capable. They build up like great chemistry with each other by this point, but still, it's so many things can go wrong. And especially when you're talking about something like a ladder, when you're talking about like balances that, you just never know. You don't know if a ladder can break. There's so many things that that are so much more unpredictable about going into something like this versus a typical wrestling match, that I'm sure that, part of the nerves was just making sure, them hoping that everything would go their way, because they were not just wrestling each other, but wrestling gravity, wrestling these sort of like very ambitious things that they were planning.
So we get the was up headbutt that was still relevant, I would say, on its last legs in 2001 after that famous summer 2000 commercial for the Dudleys. And we see some highlights early on, including Bubba catching Jeff and power bombs him on top of Edge, putting them through a table. And then the Dudleys stack 4 tables on the floor. And I'm going to say, if you're going to do a spot like this, The way you do it is you stack them up and you feed it to the audience of, oh my God, what's going to happen there? And then just leave it. Let it sit there, and it's in the back of your mind. Like, oh yeah, those 4 tables are there, like just looming that someone is falling to their death through these tables later in the match. All the ladders are set up in the ring, and the 6 climb up where Christian and Matt are tipped over. Now, Matt falls on the rope, but Christian, who had kind of made this his thing, not landing on any rope, he would just take the fall to the floor. And my God, dude, like this was, I'm glad they had like the overhead camera to get as most as you could out of this, because this was nuts. And he did this fall routinely of just missing the rope and plummeting to the floor.
That's his thing, man.
Everyone's got their thing.
He falls.
So
yeah.
Adding to this was that each team had a third. Spike Dudley runs down on behalf of the Dudleys, hitting the Dudley dog to Edge off the ladder. And then he delivers one to Christian through the table on the floor. And dude, I always thought Spike Dudley, like what a underappreciated performer who I just thought was always like, he was Darby Allin of his era. And I thought that this guy, he is not someone that gets reflected upon a lot, but I just thought this guy was the ultimate crash test dummy wrestler that had a lot of great ideas with his matches. It wasn't just stunts for the sake of stunts, but that was his role here. And this guy killed himself in ECW and then extended here.
I always felt like it was, I think it's always wonderful to think that this man had a WWE run, because when you look at, you know, like the wrestler, you would think this man would never have a chance, like a fitting Vince McMahon sort of like idea of what a professional wrestler would be. The fact that he was able to find a position and I think still be like relatively like well remembered on a pretty high level. It's great.
I'll say one of the best storylines of this era in WWF, him and Molly Holly. Like a totally different type of story. And those two were excellent in that role. Like he definitely overexceeded what I thought he would have, like transitioning over. Then Rhino is out on behalf of Edge and Christian, spearing Bubba, and then puts Matt through a table in the corner. And then the final one out is Lita, who yanks Edge off the ladder. And Rhino takes Lita and gets low blowed by Spike. Lita hits a Rana off the top to Rhino. Huge pop for that. And a chair shot by Spike knocks Rhino into a ladder that tips over Edge. Just a great, like, dominoes falling sequence.
It was so wonderful. And I didn't even realize heading into the match that, oh, by this point in time, everybody sort of had a third member attached to the group. And that to me was like what took this match to the next level beyond what you saw in TLC 1. You know, this was now involving the rest of the family members. And each person, Rhino, you know, Spike, Lita, everybody had a very significant moment crafted for them to the point where you remember every single person. Every single one made a big difference in the match.
It was like, instead of just going into this with like 6 stars, we came out of it with like, this was Rhino as like this unstoppable monster that's out of control. Spike is this undersized daredevil, and Lita's Lita. Lita's very popular by this point already.
Lita got the biggest reaction of the 3. I mean,
she is super popular in
it was
in
incredible.
This era.
Yeah.
So then Lita takes a chair and just waffles Spike in the head. Oh my God. And to celebrate the CTE that she has just administered, she takes her shirt off and turns around into a 3D. Isn't that always the way?
I believe it happened to Brandi Chastain celebrating the World Cup. Took the shirt off and just...
That was probably the reference here too, as well. Although this was kind of...
Well, it was Jeff Hardy's thing, right?
Yeah. Jeff climbs a massive ladder with Spike and Rhino on the tables, and Jeff dives off with a swanton off both to the floor. This has been a very replayed highlight from their series here. Just a gigantic ladder he comes off of here. 4 ladders are set up in the ring. Christian and Devon climb. They're fighting for the belts. Matt removes the ladder from underneath, so both men are hanging onto the holder for the belts, and Devon drops to the mat, followed by Christian. And then in the big spot that they would call the Frogger, Jeff tries to balance himself across 3 ladders towards the ring, above the ring, and stumbles and falls. And he gets legit pissed and just slaps the mat. He is so frustrated. I will argue this, and so have some of the people in this match. I thought him screwing it up actually helped here. Then this, like, to me, just this conveyed that this was a near impossible feat, and the weapons got the better of you. Like, you are a victim to your surroundings in this. I did not look at this as one of those botches that hindered the match in any way. I would even argue I thought it kind of made it even like just emphasizing the elements involved here.
I can understand.
Am I being too kind to this?
I can understand that perspective. I wouldn't necessarily say this enhanced the match for me personally, and more so like thinking about it from the perspective of the creator, you can completely understand why they'd be so pissed.
He was pissed.
Let's put this into context, okay? This match was going perfectly up until this point. Everything that they planned up until this point was so ambitious, and everybody played their role perfectly. Everything went off without a hitch. This was probably the lone blemish you can point to that was obvious, for the crowd. And if you're Jeff Hardy, you're playing a perfect solo with your band, and suddenly one off note, I can completely understand why he'd be pissed off. I'm sure he's replayed it many times in his head where he probably wishes the ladders were positioned, probably 90 degrees different. It was, but it did not ruin this match whatsoever,
Yeah, and we'll get into it here with the excerpts from the book, but this was also a very contentious spot during the construction of the match that they insisted Jeff try this out before because they were worried about him pulling this off, and he couldn't hit it in the practice, but he was adamant, I'll hit it live. So when he missed it, it was not just the spot was messed up, but it was also the
others were right.
They were second guessing Jeff, which I guess he probably took as a bit of a slight, and then they were proven right here. Rhino tips the ladder with Matt and Bubba, and they crash through the table monstrosity. Unbelievable ending here with Bubba and Matt falling to their demise.
And again, attributing it to Rhino.
Rhino gets the biggest, like Rhino was positioned as the difference maker. Edge and Christian won, but they won because of who they had with them. And Devon climbs, he is stopped by Edge, and Christian's on the other side. And again, Rhino is the one to place Christian on his shoulders and lift him to the belts as they grab them at 15 minutes and 41 seconds.
15 minutes. Think about this.
This was under 16 minutes.
It's unbelievable.
Yes. And I believe had their time cut as well, that they were to go longer. This was much shorter than TLC 1. And I mean, they just crammed so much into this, but I would never say it felt as though my head were spinning but it was like nonstop of just moment to moment to moment. There's a collection of them. And this is, I mean, if you are into like this style of big, crazy stunt-based match, this is of your upper tier.
It's the pinnacle, John, like of this TLC era. This was like their sort of like,
I'll argue that the one they did a few months later, it's called the Forgotten TLC. It's on a SmackDown with but because of the platform, no one remembers it. Like, it is aptly called the Forgotten TLC, but you're adding Jericho and Benoit to these three teams as well.
But it was not as good as this. That was very good, but this was the best of this era, the best match you can argue that any of these six have been a part of in their careers. Again, depending on the style of match, because they would all go on to have really illustrious careers. But of this particular moment, of this particular era, this was the best thing that these six will have produced together.
This is like you've been doing your Broadway show, and this is like everyone's done their roles. We've done 2 months of shows, and this is our big finale where everyone's zoned in. We know all of our spots, and it was the peak of, to me, this type of match.
It was their end game, John. Like, I mean, again, so many expectations going into this one, coming off of the success of their previous matches, the legendary ladder match between the Hardys and Edge and Christian. The last year's ladder match, TLC 1. Expectations were already so high, and they blasted through all of them with this match. I mean, we can talk about maybe like sort of like their ability to be fearless, of course, and do something like take incredible risks in these matches. But to me, it's the creativity of these six that is their superpower. The fact that they're able to use these sort of like, weapons and props and create these incredible moments. There were so many iconic visuals coming out of this match. You had, of course, like Jeff Hardy's giant ladder spot that got replayed like for eternity. The Swanton, yeah. Edge's spear to Jeff off of like the hang, like that's probably going to be replayed.
That's probably the moment here. It'll be very interesting when I like there was
Sure.
quite the debate on what the climax of the match should have been. Because quite honestly, to me, like that visual of Matt and Bubba going through the tables to me is just like
all three of those things.
Yeah.
And the fact that they all took place within seconds of each other is what continues to, I think, make this match feel so like all-time special. You know, it wasn't just the fact that you had one spot, just one of these spots in this match would have made this a success, but you had all of those things back to back to back to back on top of the great integration of Spike and Lita and Rhino in a match like this. Really, like, despite what we might have talked about with the Jeff Hardy thing, this was perfection, like, and far exceeded, I think, even very lofty expectations heading into it.
Can you envision the Iron Sheik watching this? How are we going to follow that? We're going to have to change everything.
In many ways, the gimmick battle royal was the only thing you could have followed this up with.
Okay. So now we're going to get into some of the stories behind this match. So again, this is from the Hardys book. It is called Exist to Inspire, okay, which was actually going to be the working title of Wei Ting's autobiography, and he has had to change it. So the format of this book, it's much less narrative, and it's more just like transcript, like Matt, Jeff, just alternating back and forth with their recollections. So I will try and condense this for the sake of time, but here we go. Matt. Right before WrestleMania 17, we were informed that once again, Edge and Christian were going to win the belts. Trust me on this, Michael Hayes said. You don't want to win. Hell yeah, I want to win it. It's WrestleMania.